Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Henchman's Memoirs. I see a lot of videos on the internet talking to DMs about how to create your own custom campaign world, your own custom setting. It's a lot of fun, and it's something a lot of DMs are interested in. But a lot of the advice I've seen out there, I feel, doesn't really tell you what you need to prep and what you don't. It's fun to just sit around and come up with the history of your gods and different languages and kingdoms and legendary magic items and locations and so forth. But how do you know when your campaign is ready to bring to the table? How do you know that you're using your energy to create the stuff that you really need to make your campaign ready for the table? Well, we're going to talk about that today. I believe the best way to make sure that you're making the most out of your prep time is to focus your attention on one important question. And that question is, why aren't you just using the Forgotten Realms? Okay? The Forgotten Realms is out there. The Forgotten Realms has a ton of websites that you can look up any city or any person. There's a ton of great artwork out there and maps that you can download, not just of the whole Forgotten Realms or all of Faerun, but of any town or coast or region or dungeon that you're interested in. All the work has been done for you. And this campaign setting, along with a few others like Galarian and Greyhawk and a couple of these other settings that are out there, these are what I call kitchen sink settings. All right, if you are going to get started running an adventure in the Forgotten Realms, you can choose any sort of setting that you want, and it's in here somewhere. You want to do a barbarian Conan kind of setting in the frozen north? That's fine. There's Icewind Dale off to the north. You want to do a big desert setting? There's several large deserts with different kinds of civilizations in them. Do you want to do pirates on the open ocean? We've got all of that and more. Any setting from the Underdark to isolated frontiers to bustling cities, all these things and the kitchen sink are included in the Forgotten Realms. So the reason you're not using the Forgotten Realms is what we're going to focus on to help us really dial in exactly what we want to do with our prep. Now, as far as I'm concerned, there are two reasonable answers to the question, why am I not using the Forgotten Realms? One very good answer is you want the freedom. All right, when you go to create your world, you may have an adventure that you've already got that you're wanting to run, and from there, you don't know where things are going to go. You want that freedom to say, oh, to the north of the town you're in, there's a forest and it's full of ogres that ride on giant butterflies, and you know that that is not the kind of thing you're going to be able to find in the Forgotten Realms. That's not out there. Right? You want the freedom to add things as you go. If this is your answer to why you're not using the Forgotten Realms, good for you. This isn't really the video for you. There's a lot of other videos out there to talk about how to do what you're trying to do. The best way to build a world where freedom is your answer to our key question is to build collaboratively with your players. Dungeon World has a bunch of great advice on how to do this. You draw maps, you leave blanks, and you give your players a chance to fill things in. If one of your players is a gnome and he asks you what gnome society is like or what the gnome gods are like, you just turn the question around to him. You say, well, tell me what you think, or put it out there for the table. The thing is that nothing is canon until it is said at the table. As the DM, you might have some ideas of where you want things to go or how you want certain things to be, and you can introduce those things as they come up. But you can also stay open to what your players have to say in case they have an idea that kind of sparks your imagination a little bit more. When you go with the rule that it's not canon until it's said at the table, you have that absolute freedom you're looking for to push things organically in a certain direction, working with your players and thereby getting more player buy-in. But as I said, that's not really what this video is about. My experience of creating my own custom campaign worlds has always come from me having answer number 2 to the question, why am I not using one of these Land of Generica settings? And that's because I've been going for a specific feel in my campaign. So maybe you just got done playing a video game that you really like the setting and the feel. Or maybe you just got done binging a Netflix series, or you just watched a movie, or whatever it is, read a series of novels, and you've got this feel, you've got this idea of this world that you want to get into. And for whatever reason, the specific feel that you want really doesn't fit anywhere in the world of Generica. There's something unique enough and sort of edgy enough and sort of really grabbed your imagination about this setting that you want to run that just doesn't feel like it's going to fit anywhere in the Forgotten Realms. So, once you've picked what your new direction that you want to go is going to be, where do you start? Again, focusing on our question, why aren't we just using the Forgotten Realms? Well, step 1 is to highlight the key differences. All right? Anybody who comes into the game, more or less, nowadays, has either seen the Dungeons and Dragons movie, or they've seen the Critical Role cartoon, or they are familiar with Baldur's Gate 3. They have a basic idea of what the world of Generica is like. They have an idea of these big, bustling, cosmopolitan cities with all these different races rubbing shoulders. They have the idea that magic is common and accepted, and it makes life better for a bunch of people, that there are dragons, that there are monsters, that there are adventurers that are an everyday occurrence, and people go around delving into dungeons. You know, there's a huge dungeon under the main city, whether it's Waterdeep or Greyhawk. And people just go down there and go on adventures and come back with magic items and get rich. And it's almost like a superhero kind of setting. The world gets saved every few decades from total destruction. And that's just part of life in the world of Generica. So you start with the assumption that your players know what that world is. If you are running a vaguely medieval setting, you don't need to include that. If you are running all of the races that are in the player's handbook, you don't need to mention that. What you want to do is start thinking to yourself and really getting clear on what are the things that separate my setting from the land of Generica. What are the key things, 3, 4, 5 bullet points that I can put in front of my players that are going to really give them the feel of this campaign in contradistinction to the Forgotten Realms? That's what my players need to know. That's what I need to give them to kind of pitch the campaign world to them and get them started thinking about it. Now, we're going to go through an example. As anybody who has listened to this channel for any period of time knows, I am all about gothic horror and dark fantasy. The Henchman loves Ravenloft. The Henchman loves dark horror fantasy settings. So, how do I express to my players what are the key differences between the Forgotten Realms and the sort of kludged together Ravenloft setting that I am running? Well, number 1, humans predominate, and the other races are much rarer, and even those, you only really get the sort of classic Tolkien races, the first edition races. You don't have any Dragonborn running around in Ravenloft. You don't have any Warforged running around in Barovia. You could, but that's not my setting. That's not the feel I'm going for. Also, I'm going for a more Victorian era, sort of flintlocks and muskets and tricorn hats and Brotherhood of the Wolf, that kind of stuff, to make my setting, the way I want it to feel. So one of the things that I like to do is, if you can get some images together, if you can find some pictures off of the internet, or if, in this case, you can get an entire art book that really speaks to the feel of the campaign that you want. I have found, at least for me, image boards, things like this, a bunch of pictures can, say 1,000 words. I mean, not to be cliched, but to sort of throw some images in front of my players, and they get tired of me sending them, text after text after text with these random images that I've found that's like, this speaks to my campaign. This is what my Ravenloft campaign is going to look like. This creepy cultist guy, that's my Ravenloft setting. That's what we're going for, right? These afraid people with something in the background, yeah, now you're getting there. Now you're starting to see what we want, right? So what you're really focusing on, again, you don't have to come up with your whole pantheon, okay? If your pantheon is more or less just the Forgotten Realms pantheon with people renamed, characters already, or players that is, already understand the idea of what a Dungeons and Dragons pantheon looks like. You don't need to single that out. You don't need to cover the standard monsters that are going to be there, right? The players expect these things. Focus in on what makes your setting unique. For example, I might tell the players in my setting, there are all kinds of monsters that you would expect to find in Dungeons & Dragons, but in my setting, you're going to find a lot more vampires, werewolves, witches, hags than you're going to find dragons, for example, or entire nations of storm giants. Those things are in the basic world of Generica, but they don't play as big of a role in sort of my own Ravenloft setting. So what you want to do is really get your head clear on what those differences are that can really grab your player's imagination and give them an idea of where you want to go. Then, once you've done that, all you need to do to be ready to bring your campaign to the table is focus on player-facing details. I can't stress this enough. Once you have given your players a feel for your campaign, all the rest of your prep work needs to be things that the players need to know to create their characters. What classes are going to be allowed? If you're a cleric, what are some of the basic names of the gods of good and justice and the hearth, that my player might be a follower of? What is the church like? In my Ravenloft campaigns, the church is the Church of Ezra or the Church of the Morning Lord, which are both basically stereotypes of the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages. They are into inquisitions and witch hunts, and they can be very repressive and sort of judgmental. But these are also the people that can turn undead and heal diseases and heal people with lycanthropy. So the church, both good and bad, sort of my idea of what the church was like in the Middle Ages, both good and bad, those stereotypes make up my church. It's not a pantheon. There's just two churches, and they each are more or less monotheistic. So that gives the cleric enough, that gives the paladin enough to know what they need to know in order to create their characters. That's all you need for your setting. You don't need to fill the players in on the whole history of these two sects and how they have interacted down through the years and when the Church of Ezra started and what the name of all the holy books are. Those are the kind of things that you can develop as the game continues, which is what I've done. What the players need to know is they need to know for them, are wizards, okay, you're doing a gothic horror Ravenloft setting, are wizards hated and feared? Am I allowed to play a dragonborn? What kind of backgrounds are allowed? If we're using firearms, they need to know things like that. The players are only interested, unfortunately, in stuff that affects their characters. They don't want a lengthy lore dump from you about the whole history of all these different areas that you've come up with, because it's too much for them to take in, and they have no context for it until it affects them. So, how do you know when your custom-made campaign is ready for the table? Well, I'll tell you. When you've thought through how every character class that you're allowing fits in, when you've thought through how every race that you're allowing fits in, when you've come up with the languages and you've gone through the equipment, if there's any, like in my campaign where firearms are allowed, if there's any equipment that is important for the players to know about. And then finally, you just need to, any optional rules, any homebrew rules, any house rules that you're including. Of course, in my campaign, there's always some variation of the stress and insanity rules because those are the kind of campaigns I run. So the players need to know about that at character creation. What is going to result in my character being driven mad? And once you have those sort of 5 or 6 points narrowed down and kind of hammered out, you are ready to start playing. You are going to be able to give your players a unique experience because you're focusing on what's different about your campaign from what they were expecting and what they already know. So give us a like and a subscribe if this advice is helpful to you. Let me know in the comments if you think I'm completely wrong, and we'll catch you next time on the Henchman's Memoirs.